It was born out of motorsport's most infamous grudge. Following months of careful negotiation, Ford was ready to do a deal with Enzo Ferrari to purchase his company. The old man, as wily as he was, knew he needed some major investment, and Ford wanted to go endurance racing. By May 1963, a deal was on the table, bringing the U.S. behemoth together with the Italian upstart to create road cars and competition machinery. But when Enzo, who may never have intended to sell at all, balked at losing the autonomy he so cherished, he sent the Americans packing. Empty-handed on his return to Detroit, Ford's point man, Don Frey, was told by Henry Ford to go to Le Mans and beat his ass. Or so the legend goes. The result was the GT40, a car that most definitely is a legend. As impassive a motorsport legend as the statues on Easter Island, as looming a presence as the monolith in 2001, A Space Odyssey, everyone knows that the GT40 cleaned up in 1960s sports car racing, but the fact that you'd probably struggle to name any of the winning drivers confirms the star power of this particular car. Yet its development was decidedly ad hoc, its engineering improvisational, and success far from guaranteed, not least because Ford as an organization had precious little racing expertise when the boss issued his ultimatum. In fact, it was an expat Brit called Roy Lunn, who sadly passed away earlier this month, who had been involved with Aston Martin's 1949 Le Mans effort and was running Ford's advanced vehicle department, who got the gig. Lunn's team had developed 1962's Mustang concept, a forward-thinking, mid-engined, aluminium-bodied roadster. On June 12, Lunn and Frey presented a confidential competition program to Ford's cigar-chomping execs, envisaging a mid-engined race car called the GT40 and a road-going GT46 iteration. According to Preston Lerner's new book on Ford's big adventure, Lunn wanted to create a high-performance, two-seater sports car prototype that, if produced in low volume, would neutralize the Corvette image. Apparently, it took 5 minutes to get sign-off, the other 55 being spent discussing the marketing strategy. Lunn was packed off back to Blighty, where a thriving homespun racing subculture and the urgency of the mission soon led him to Lola. As tiddly as the firm was, its racing car was the right configuration, had an aluminium body, and used a Ford V8. It was effectively a prototype GT40 in all but name. Lunn bought two, squirreled away $1.7 million from the Dearborn bean counters, hired ex-Aston Martin team boss John Wyer, and got to work. The Ford Advanced Vehicles HQ was in Slough, deemed, amazingly enough, a step up from Lola's base in Bromley. Lola's owner Eric Broadley soon clashed with Lunn, while Broadley's deputy, Tony Southgate, recalled that the Ford approach was somewhat uptight. There was no deviating from the script. Well, motor racing is about as far removed from that as you can get. Bruce McLaren was hired to evaluate a prototype in August 1963, and work swiftly progressed. The steel-bodied GT40 was heavy but durable, while a primitive computer program helped calibrate the suspension geometry. The first completed car, Chassis No. GT 101, ran a Ford Fairlane-sourced 4.2-liter V8, but with an aluminium block and pushrods. Coventry-based Abbey Panels fabricated the body, and the whole thing was finished barely in time to make its flight from Heathrow to JFK ahead of a big unveiling the day before the New York Auto Show, in April 1964. In going into GT racing, we feel we are accepting the toughest challenge presently available to the minds and talents of motorcar builders, Ford boss Lee Iacocca told the press. The rest is history, but the glory sure took its sweet time arriving. A Le Mans test a few weeks later revealed severe high-speed instability issues. The GT40 could do 200 miles per hour but wanted to get airborne above 170, this being very early days in the world of racing aero, and its first 3 competitive outings, in the Nürburgring 1,000 kilometers, Le Mans 24 hours and Reims 12 hours, resulted in a bleak string of DNFs. Transatlantic discord saw the operation move to a firm called Carcraft in Dearborn, and by the end of the year John Wyer, though still in charge of building GT40s, handed the job of racing them to an American ex-racer and legend in his own lunchtime, Carroll Shelby. His Shelby American outfit and decidedly more gung-ho ethos gave the GT40 program the character and performance boost it needed. Its HQ covered an area of 12.5 acres near LA International Airport, on a site previously used for building military jets, and many of the staff were real good old boys. As A.J. Bem writes in his book Go Like Hell, Shelby had an idiosyncratic management style. "How would you like to work in a snake pit for a real snake?" he asked while interviewing a new secretary. Out went the small block 4.2-liter 255 cu in V8, in came the 7.0-liter 427 cu in unit Shelby had used so famously in the Cobra, matched to a new ZF transmission. At Daytona in 1965, the MKII GT40 scored its first win, with Ken Miles and Lloyd Ruby at the wheel. A podium in Sebring followed a month later, but the rest of the year and Le Mans was a disaster, all 5 GT40s recording DNFs. But 1966 saw the good times finally kick in, across a mix of works and privateer entries. There was a 1-2-3 finish at Daytona. The 7.0-liter V8 was now producing 463 bhp, enough grunt to see almost 200 miles per hour on the track's banking. Miles and Ruby won the race again. The Mark II was a really good car, Ruby noted. It had lots of power, was fast and handled damned good. 13 Fords raced at Sebring. Ken Miles won, passing Dan Gurney, who was forced to push his car across the finish line after it expired on the final corner. Then came the sensational 1-2-3 win at Le Mans, for which Ford's preparation included running a development engine on a dyno for 48 hours of simulated laps at La Sarthe, gear changes and all, while a further 12 engines were race prepared. Ford assembled an army for Le Mans that year: 100 personnel, 9 cars, 7 spare engines, and 21 tons of spare parts, all moved around in a giant truck too big to fit in some of the tighter French side streets. Henry Ford, too, was there, anticipating a memorable return on his by now considerable investment. In fact, he handed Leo Beebe, head of Ford's racing programs, a business card inscribed with a simple message: "You better win." They did, but not without controversy. A rainy race eliminated the Ferraris overnight, and the GT40s had such a commanding lead by Sunday morning that the team ordered the front runners to reduce their pace from the low 3:30s to 4.00 minutes, more difficult than it sounds. A bungled staged photo finish upset Ford Racing stalwart Ken Miles, who had to settle for second place, behind Chris Amon and Bruce McLaren, who had started slightly further back and were therefore deemed to have covered the greater distance in the same time. Ford's top brass didn't care. They had their Le Mans victory at last, all the sweeter because the highest-placed Ferrari was 8th, a distant 47 laps behind. A.J. Foyt and Dan Gurney won Le Mans the following year in the new Mark IV iteration, a highly evolved J-car that had proven much faster during testing at Ford's giant Kingman, Arizona facility, comfortably defeating the Ferrari 330P4s and the radically B-winged Chaparral 2F. Job done, for Ford High Command anyway. For 68, John Wyer resurrected his race team, secured sponsorship from Gulf Oil, and hooked up with a guy called John Wilmot to establish JW Automotive Engineering. FIA rule changes effectively reversed the GT40 back into contention, and Pedro Rodriguez and Lucien Bianchi, the late Jules' uncle, took another, but this time unexpected Le Mans win. The last triumph came in 1969, with Jackie Ickx and Jackie Oliver scoring one of the greatest race victories ever, in the year that Porsche's 917 debuted. Ickx led Hans Hermann's Porsche 908 across the finish line, roughly 120 meters ahead of the German after 372 laps. A proper photo finish, this time. Amazingly, he was driving the same chassis that had won the race the year before. Is that cool enough for you?